So we know, okay, let's come in here and let's see the monitor. And then we will use this and move it out of the way until it's out of the shot. Right there. Okay, now it's out of the shot. Oops. Oh, I grabbed it. I grabbed it instead of entered the camera. Okay, we're gonna have to find our spot again. So let's come up here. We'll go to walk, back up, in, up, over. It's probably too high. Switch back to creep. Something like that. And we'll back up a little bit. Back up a little bit. Again, not competing with his head. Okay, you can still sort of see it there, but if I move this way, you can't really see it. We're gonna have to move it again because I like this composition here. I'm just gonna take this a little bit, slide it a little bit over, and let's jump back in. Okay, now that bounce from frame right, that little tiny leak down it's a little bit too much at this stage, right? So then we gotta lower it because we've got everything else set. And once you have the things set in the workflow, you don't go backwards, right? Because then you start changing everything. If you start pulling filters now and wanting to affect the background, you've got 15 different elements that you now have to change. So stick to one basic element, nail it, and then move on. Now, that doesn't mean that this is all happening. We do one first, then the next one. Depending on the size of your team, you have to constantly be thinking about this stuff as you're moving. Like the neg might be moving at the same time as the bounce. You're there orchestrating these changes. Okay, so here, let's just take it down. Let's lose a whole stop here. What's that, 50 lumens? Okay, enter the camera. And that's more like it, right? Even that is probably a little bit strong. And that's probably, you know, the angle of the key. We're not really reaching around to that other side of the face. We'll take that still though. Come in here, and if we just bring it towards us a little bit, oops, this way. Let's jump up so you can see what we're doing. I'm gonna pull it, because we didn't really get it around to his cheek enough, I'm gonna pull it this way, right? So it opens up to more of his cheek, and if we jump down, just ever so slightly, we are opening it up and making it feel a little bit more like it's wrapping around, the key is wrapping around to the other side of his face. So let's bump out of there. We'll go to our storyboard so you can start to see the difference. Okay, there it was originally placed, and then you feel it, right? It's a little bit brighter because we got closer, and it just wraps around that cheek just a little bit more. So there's pretty good. There's wrapped around a little bit more. You can also see it leaking onto this a little bit more, and that is where I would end it. Now, does this match the previous levels that we had in the wide shot? Let's go to the wide. Significantly brighter, right? So in the grade, as long as we don't clip anything in this car or anything, I'd be bringing down these levels. And then here, if we get to our final shot, I would be bringing up these levels and keeping this the same because it's all about balancing the key to the background, getting the shape locally. And then in the grade, you can massage the continuity so that it seems a little bit brighter in the background versus what's happening in the foreground, right? So that's our main giant big setup. Okay, now how to do the same thing if you don't have as much equipment? Well, first things first, if you're low on equipment, probably the first thing that is going to go is we're going to lose our overhead. So let's get rid of that, right? And let's just see how that changes things if we jump inside the camera now. Okay, you can see really that it just becomes harsher because we haven't balanced the neg from frame right and the key, right? Those were originally balanced to having a softer overhead light. So what you would want to do there is now I'm going to take a little bit off of that key, bring it around a little bit more fronty, but we're gonna say that we don't even have a 12 by, right? Let's get completely rid of this 12 by. Move it over here so we don't have to deal with it. Now let's take a look inside of our camera. Well, now we've only got the edge and it's really dark, right? Really dark is not good. Let's move this 4 by out of the way. So now we're gonna say we only have a 4 by poly, right? Which is nothing. We're gonna rotate this around so we can actually see the light that we're gonna get out of it. Let's go that way. And then if we come up here, you'll be able to see it overhead, that we are going to just bring it around. Same thing, it's just a smaller source. 4 by poly for this size shot is probably not gonna be enough, right? You're probably gonna have to be closer. But you can sort of feel the difference that it's making, even at that bounce level. If we go back into our storyboards, you'll be able to see. So that's the 4 by without the overhead, right? Just looks a little bit, it's not as nice because it's so small. And you can feel the smallness when you're this far away from someone. If we're in the close-up, because the 4x4, you can have it so close, it seems significantly bigger. But here, it's not a great look. So we're gonna need more level out of it. So let's just do that. We'll imagine, again, if we're down here and you see, you call for like a 4x bounce and you see it angled like, where are we at? If you see somebody, which is normal, I don't know if they teach this in grip school or lighting school, but they're always gonna angle it like this, right? They're always gonna angle it back. And we don't want it angled back because then it's coming up this guy's nose, right? And oftentimes you'll see the grips or the electrics, they'll hold it like this down low and bounce the light back up because they want maximum level. They don't know. I would always say, just lose that angle. Tilt it down this way and go up with it. So go higher. And they're like, well, we're not gonna get as much level. You say, that's okay. We don't need that much level. We want less level, but make it look nice rather than too much level and make it look bad. So here, you can just see it just feels a little bit sourcier. The shadows are a little bit smaller. And then, but again, of course you can do it. And then we're gonna bring in our neg, which you can do with just this one, really. You don't need more than that. For something like this, 2 is ideal, but we won't go through the process of showing you 2 because it's the same thing as before. We wrap that around, we bring it in, and then with the 4x, I'm gonna wanna bring it this side of him, between him and the camera, then we're gonna rotate it that way, and we'll see if we're in the shot. So you want it as close as you can to him. And we're not in the shot with it, right? If we just see it's just there. So I would walk that in even more to try and get more out of it. And then you can do the same technique with another 4x. You could have this 4x also. If we, well, let's just do it. We'll duplicate it. We'll bring it over here. We'll lift it up. And then we'll twist it around so we're actually getting level this way. And we'll jump back in. And now you can see we're way in the shot. Let's come down, come around and look at it. Again, funky little angle here that we're on. Let's tilt it forward, like that. Let's also open it up a little bit. And then we will jump out of here, come up to the vertical view so we can see what we're doing. And now let's slide it down towards the camera so it's out of the frame. If we bring up our director's monitor, again, you should be sitting at the monitor while you're doing all this stuff. Somebody else should be doing this while you're sitting at the monitor. And it's almost out of the frame. And there it is out of the frame, just there. Okay, and we'll probably lower it because we don't need that much out of it. Let's do 40, something like that. And then we back up from there, enter the camera again, and let's see our results. Okay, so we go to our storyboards, and now you'll see this is the lower version, not a whole lot out of the poly. And then our next version, the poly a little bit more juice. And then we also have that little kick down the right-hand side of his face. So I would say definitely I like the bigger version the best. I would probably bring this around just a little bit more to the front, but that is how you balance a scene outside. Start with the background. Set your levels for what you want to that. Bring in the overhead, not too much, don't take too much out of it, because the more you take out of it, the more you have to bring in bounce in order to be able to balance the levels. So just take enough out of it to just knock down the harshness of the shadows. Then we bump out, we add the 12x12 of ultra bounce here, or of unbleached muslin to the left-hand side, and you're laughing. One thing that I will say to look out for is if we use, let's go back to using this overhead. Where's the overhead? Here it is. Just be careful when you're promising, oops, that's the road that I just took. Just be careful when you're promising things on the tech scout of like, oh yeah, we can just use an overhead. The overhead is fine if the shot is not too wide. If the shot is too wide, I'll show you what happens. Let's come in here. And overhead works unless you can see the ground. As soon as you see the ground, the gig is up. And you see sometimes people will use overhead still if you can see the ground, and they'll add like branches or leaves around the outside. It just looks weird, right? Come up with a better solution than having to use an overhead in the middle of the day if it's just a 12x12. This is where you start to see the giant fly swatter rigs come in and really take out the level, take out the top light for the entire scene. If you have to do it piecemeal like this, just make sure your shot is small enough to where you don't see the ground. Because even here, right? As long as you don't see that shadow, that back shadow back there, just on the ground here, I'm looking right here. As long as you don't see that, you're okay. Even like from here, you could get away with it, right? Here, 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 you're still fine. There, you're not fine because you start to see that shadow in the background. So let's come back here. We'll switch this to creep mode so we can just go a little bit slower. rise up, get that little tiny bit of leak down that side without getting too good, and we'll back up even more, and something like that for our final shot. Okay, and that is a look. We've got the budget way to do it, we've got the bigger way to do it, and you now know the system for balancing on daytime exteriors.